Okay, check it out. This is example 2, and let's read it together real quick. It says you conduct a survey that asks 286 total students in your freshman class whether they play a sport or a musical instrument. Okay, as we keep reading, it says 118 of the freshman students play a sport. Okay, so if they play a sport, that would be a yes. Okay, so as we track across to the total number of students that do play a sport, it says right here that in this particular data set, it would be 118. I know it's not a number, but hold on, let me change my settings. It's not necessarily written as a number, but it's written out and it says 118. So I write that right here, 118. And then right at the beginning, it says there are a total of 286 students. And I know when it comes to these two-way tables, that the actual ultimate total will lie in this spot. I'm going to wait and just kind of make sense out of that number in just a sec. But let's keep reading. It says 118 students play a sport. Okay, 64 of those students play an instrument. So that means out of the 118, we're going to say yes plays an instrument as well. That's right there. And that would be 64. Okay, so you can see right now as we read this paragraph, it's a little tricky to make sense out of it. If we didn't have this graphic given to us, it would be even more challenging to try to make sense out of all of the yes-no comparison on instrument versus yes-no on a sport. So let's keep reading. It says 93 of the students do not play a sport. So that would be right here. 93 of those students do not play a sport or an instrument. It says right there. So we have to keep reading and make sure to read the whole thing. It says do not play a sport and does not play an instrument. And that's why 93 would go in that spot right there. No is what that would categorically fit into. That's why we call it bivariate data, because it's two variables analyzed at the same time. Instrument, yes or no. Sport, yes or no. And then right here it says organize the results in a two-way table, including the marginal frequency. So what that means is marginal frequency just means the totals on the sides. Include those margins, the totals, the gray area right here. Just make sure to include those. And so it says total number of students should add up to 286. That's given to us. That's the total number. All right. So one thing we can do as we look at this graphic, hopefully they give you a nice graphic like this. If they don't, then you have to organize your own table, which adds another level of creativity and another level of complexity to it. So the next step as we analyze this two-way table is to try to figure out what vacancies or what unknown amounts can we actually figure out. So there needs to be across a particular table, there needs to be a total placement and an individual value in order to figure out an unknown amount. And so right here I take 118 and I'm actually going to subtract 64 from it. Feel free to use a calculator and we would get 54 in this case. Okay, where does that 54 go? It lives right here because I'm actually taking it against the total in that row. You see the row right here, 64 plus 54 will total up to 118. This is where it starts getting a little trickier. You can see very quickly that we need to fill in all the rest of these gaps. Okay, in order to fill in these gaps, you need to know more information. But do you see this particular gap right there? Okay, that particular gap should total up to 186. So that means 118 plus a certain amount should equal 186. So my arithmetic on this case should be the total, which is 286, that adds down the column. So right here, right? Like down the column should total up to, this is the big column in the corner where everything is totaled up to. That means it's sport yes and sport no that would actually total up to the total amount of students. And so we get to take 286 and minus 118. So at this point, it's sort of like a Sudoku puzzle where you have to figure out the unknown amount in any particular spot that's missing. So find the missing spots. It doesn't make sense to do any of these particular unknown spots first. You could actually total these up, and you could do that one in that order first if you wanted to. You could do them in a various different orders if you wanted to. So we could see right here that this would actually be 168. Feel free to use a calculator. You got 286 minus 118, and you would get 168. And where does that go? That goes in this particular spot right here, 168. All right. As I can see down this column right here, 54 plus 93 is going to be a total of 147. 147. Okay, so there's a variety of things you could kind of do first, right? You could have kind of figured that part out first, or you could kind of juggle different values around. But why don't we go across the no values? So that would be the total number of no's would be 168. As long as we did our arithmetic over here correctly, then this should work out correctly in the middle. Okay, so the number of people who do not play a sport and who do not play an instrument is 93. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the total amount of people who do not play a sport, 168, and I'm going to subtract the people who also do not play a sport, an instrument, and subtract that away from that value, right, like that. So I can see right here that this would actually be as a value of 75. So this particular value would be 75 because it would be 168 minus 93, which is 75. Okay, then our very last thing that we have to figure out is the total that would go in this spot right here, which would be 64 plus 75. So you can see like how this is sort of a puzzle of arithmetic. Minus and subtract and adding. Really, it's just kind of adding, subtracting, and trying to figure out that unknown value, whether it's totaling something up or whether it's subtracting to find the inside, one of these inside pieces right here. Okay, so as you can see right here, that 64 plus 75 is 139. All right, so this particular value is 139. We have actually figured out the entire, or filled in the entire marginal frequencies on the outside and all of the two-way tables in terms of the individual frequencies as well. Frequency, again, is a fancy word that just means the number of counts. So it's inside here, this particular value, what does that represent? If I ask you to interpret that particular value, what does that mean exactly? If you were looking at this whole table, it would mean there are 64 students who play a sport and play an instrument, because it is a yes and a yes. So you could probably interpret any number of these values and make sense out of any of these values. 286 is the total number of students. 118 play sports. 139 play an instrument. 64 play a sport and an instrument. All right, that concludes our example 2.